Okay, hello everyone and welcome back to Always Watching. This episode of Succession had me feeling all kinds of ways. First, I don't know if y'all believe in coincidences, but there were two references in there that just tripped me out. I felt like I was in vertigo. First was the reference to Somalia, because my background is Somali. And the second was the reference to Oman, because I work in Oman. So I was just like, this is like I see dead people energy. So anyway, so the episode was fantastic. And not everything that glitters is gold. That was pretty much the point of it. And the way Lukas is portrayed is fantastic, right? The way he walks, the way he hunches his back. Like, he's so awkward, but he's so handsome. So it's such a weird contrast. And we find out that on top of sending his PR person vials of blood, he's also inflating his profit numbers, right? So he is not the tech genius he wants everyone to believe. And if that's true, then Kendall is about to go, as he says, reverse Viking, and he's about to buy his ass. So this party was a win for some people and just totally devastating for other people. So to start with, the biggest loser in this episode was Shiv. And the episode begins with Tom and Shiv in such a good place. It's like they're back in their honeymoon phase. I love how the episode started with Tom literally serving her, and then her basically scolding him for being a servant. Like, that was just a trip to me. And he still doesn't know about the baby. And I think it's because originally in the script, like, this storyline was not there. So sometimes we forget that Shiv is pregnant. Like, I have to remind myself, I'm like, oh, she's pregnant. This party was supposed to be their reunion, right? Tom was about to kill two birds with one stone, right? With the help of his wife, he would be able to network and kind of secure his place. Because right now he's kind of in limbo. He doesn't know where he stands. I love the metaphor about the scorpion, because they're both scorpions, right? They're about to kill each other. And I have a feeling that Tom is just a nuclear bomb waiting to go off. And this episode was his awakening, right? Like, he could not sleep at the end, and his mind is turning, right? He has nowhere left to go. And honestly, I think he realized at the end of that conversation, he has nothing left to lose. Shiv and Tom were hosting this party together. They could not have been further apart. So in this episode, we see that Shiv has totally dedicated herself to Lukas in such a way. And I was impressed by how much transparency. Like, she was telling Lukas everything. Like, she wasn't concealing any information. She wasn't trying to hedge her bets. Like, she put all her eggs in the Lukas basket, and for that she suffered. So during a family brunch, the brothers, finally they tell her they've looped her in, right? She's now part of the team, and they need a backup plan, right? If they're not able to convince everybody that the company is worth more than what Lukas is offering to buy it for, they need a plan B. Their plan B is to basically just drown him in regulatory paperwork in hopes of either, drawing this out as long as possible, hopes he gets bored, or hopes, best case scenario, the plan doesn't go through, right? So they're sitting at brunch and they all agree that this is a good plan. Even though Shiv is back in the loop, it's too little too late. And watching this episode, especially when you think about the conversation with Tom, Tom gets a lot of slack for being a loyal servant. And that's because with these three kids, like, they're not servants. None of them can be subservient to anyone. Like, you cannot have three kings or two CEOs in the castle, because there will be a war, right? These kids are not naturally subservient, and someone's got to go, right? And that's ultimately their issue. So as soon as Shiv hears that they're going to try to drown him in paperwork, she calls Lukas and she's like, you need to get to this party. You need to get here right now. And I think she's desperate, right? This is the closest that she's ever gotten to any type of power, because she knows, to be honest, even if she stays loyal to her brothers, nothing will come from it. So any hope she has at this point is with Lukas, right? She needs a position, and she needs a position like now. There's a lot going on at this messy party. First, I like that the party was hosted in Shiv and Tom's apartment, because we're no longer using Logan's place, right? Or Connor's place. So it's like kind of a new space, because every time they gathered, it was always at Logan's place. So now it's like somewhere else, so it's smaller. It's not as, but I don't know, it was a good change. So you have two things going on at this messy party. You have Lukas drama, and then you have this mess with the election. And the episode kept teasing like an explosion. Like, you kept waiting for shit to pop off, either with Roman, either with Ken, either with Lukas. Ebba looked like she was about to go off on someone. But actually, the explosion was with Tom and Shiv. And when you look at the start of the episode, those are the last two people that you would think would have gone off on each other. You know, when you look at the potential explosion this episode had. So in theory, this party should have been great. But the turning point is when Lukas is invited, right? He's like an unexpected guest that kind of messes up the vibe of everyone. And I don't think Lukas expected to be exposed like that, right? It's not like he came to crash the party. That would be different. You know, like then I would think maybe he was up to no good. But he kind of felt like he crashed. Like he kind of came through. He's like, what's up? What are y'all doing? Like, what's good? Like he kind of came in like already too close to the sun. I thought it was so funny that he brought his whole team with him after scolding, you know, Ken and Roman for doing the same when they were in, you know, when they were in Norway. And so watching Lukas, we find out that he's not a genius, right? In fact, he's very far from it. And he's been inflating his numbers. And this harassment with the PR was really annoying. You know, poor Ebba. And the thing is, Lukas is such a pretentious, he's like a caricature of new money, right? This kind of population that made their money quite quickly, but they have no sense of, you know, business knowledge. I think the only thing Lukas does well is because you can't tell if he's like an evil genius or an evil idiot. Like in this episode, we find out that he's probably an evil idiot. Turns out he can't even code, right? I was like, not Lukas out here judging everybody, can't do nothing. So the whole time he was harassing Ebba, like that was really annoying. He has an ego, and I think he gets off on putting people in their place, and he's very annoyed that he can't really do that to this family. And I think one of the most shocking things in this episode is when Roman found out about the blood, right? When he found out that he had been sending his assistants vials of blood. And I'm surprised he didn't go off, right? I was expecting Roman to go off and be like, look guys, we can't sell to this man. He does all these evil things. And they spent so much time trying to find all this information, and they found it all in one night. And they kept it to themselves, right? And that drama on the mountain, it's like they have to be very careful because they need to make it seem like the reason they don't want to do business with Lukas is because it's a bad deal. Not because they're petty and vindictive. Watching Shiv literally drag Lukas around the room so he can kind of pitch how horrible her brothers are was really something else, right? Like that was really fun. And he's really convinced he's doing a great job, right? He's like, you know what? I overestimated these people. They just want, like, it's really not that much. It's just gossip and money. And I think that, you know, watching Ken and Lukas, like they're kind of two sides of the same coin. And you see that when they both try to pitch themselves to Nate. So another reason why Tom may have gone off is because Shiv's sort of soulmate is at the party. And so one of the people they need to convince is this Nate guy. And so we see, you know, two different sides of, like they're both a disaster, right? Ken is promising good press in return for regulatory oversight. And Lukas is promising to overhaul the way they've done things thus far, right? It doesn't really make any sense. And the way Lukas and Ken were operating, it wasn't that different, right? They were both kind of evoking Logan's memory, either good or bad, to try and get, you know, solicit the reactions that they want, right? And I think one of the best lines in this episode is when Nate basically says to Ken, I don't feel comfortable, and you're not Logan, and I'm not Jill. Like, I ain't this old guy. Like, we don't have to do business that way. Right? We can keep it a little more clean, and I think that's the issue, right? Everyone is either trying to do things as Logan would, or they're trying to pitch themselves as the opposite. Again, they're basically the same person, right? Living Plus, we already know is BS. We know it has no value. It doesn't make any damn sense. And now we know Lukas is, you know, I knew the name was stupid. What is it? Gojo, GoPro, whatever. It just sounded stupid. And so now we realize, like, we thought it was stupid, and now we know it's stupid, right? So he also has no value. So honestly, they should combine and try to create some type of value. Lukas does a good job of making himself at home, right? He's chilling. His squad has found a corner. They're walking around this house like, and you could never do that in Logan's apartment, right? Like, ain't no way he would ever allow this type of insubordination, right? Like they were just lounging, and I was like, if you don't get off that chair. And I think the moment Shiv knew she was screwed is when she pulled Lukas aside, and she was basically like, listen, I've been helping you out all night. What are you going to do for me? And in so many words, he basically said nothing, right? Like that was the answer. And, you know, it's obvious that Lukas is using her to speed up this deal so he can buy Waystar, buy ATN, and infuse some value back into his own raggedy company. And it's not made clear until Shiv finds out about India, right? Once she finds out that Lukas is not what he seems, that's when it's devastating, right? And the fact that Lukas couldn't even give her an answer, or a fake answer, I thought was interesting. Like, he could have just said, sure, we'll talk about it after the merger. He doesn't give her any answer. He's like, we'll circle back. And again, watching Lukas talk to Ebba, it's really interesting because he cannot talk to Shiv that way, right? It's almost like he was trying to put her in her place. And he almost didn't like that she was asking that, and she clocked that. So when she realized that, I think she kind of low-key knew she messed herself up. And there's a moment when he says, that's my girl, or that a girl, or something like that, and she just looks at him like, you raggedy, stinky man, like I'm coming for your neck. This knowledge of India is the thing that kind of makes, by the time we get to this conversation with Tom, there's a lot going on here, right? Like there's a lot that just kind of comes out as a result of how this night went. And poor Tom, I just want to talk about Tom for a second. He's tired. He's low on sleep. This was supposed to be his resurrection, and it ends up being his funeral. Like, the man is literally hosting his own funeral, and he tries his best, right? And it doesn't help that Shiv keeps putting him down. Again, she's feeling some type of way about Lukas. She hasn't really looped him in, and the man just wants to sleep, right? And she won't allow him to sleep. And the thing she says, like, you don't have anything to do. You're looking for shiny heads. Like, you're just looking for asses to kiss. There's plenty of asses to kiss right here. Why don't you just stay a while and do that here? And he's like, honey, I just don't got that energy. Ever since Italy, he's been out of their good graces, right? He's dead to Ken. He's dead to Roman. And now, he was barely alive to Shiv. And this episode, they make it clear, right? That was the thing. Like, they don't like Tom. Like, Tom is on the out. He ain't never getting back in. Even Greg, despite his treacherous behind, was given a task to do by Kendall, right? Like, you're starting to see a separation between Greg and Tom, right? Like, the moment where Greg kind of keeps these Swedes, busy and entertained, even Greg has more of a lifeline. And so Tom is just fed up. I think the thing that sent Tom spiraling is the fact that he's hosting a party and he's hearing rumors that he will be fired, right? Some guy comes up to him and says, I heard you're not going to be here. Basically saying, like, your days are numbered. And I think this kind of made him realize it doesn't really matter what I do. I'm going to bed. I'm tired. Get to this explosion. And the way it kind of builds up is fantastic because Shiv, she kind of makes it about herself. Right? She's like, listen, I may have effed up with Lukas. Playing both sides was a bad idea. And Tom was like, no way. And this whole idea of you'll always be okay. This is where the miscommunication happens, because for Shiv, it's not about being okay. She wants power. And she's scared that if this doesn't work out, she will never get the power that she wants, right? She'll never get the position that she feels she deserves. They're also power hungry. And Tom, to his defense, they keep calling him a hick. They keep calling him, like, all these names, but he wasn't raised in the same way that Shiv was, like, in this kind of cold, cutthroat, New York kind of way of doing things, right? So a lot of his empathy and the way he moves is kind of misinterpreted as servile. And that's what he was trying to explain. He's like, listen, I put my neck on the line for you. And on top of that, in Tom's defense, the reason that Shiv is angry is because not because he's a servant, is because he wasn't her servant, right? I think he was mad that, everyone, like, they have this obsession with their father, right? Everybody put their father first. I think Shiv is more angry with Tom because, he's just another person that put Logan ahead of her, right? Like, there is that kind of ego going on here. And I'm happy that Tom called her out, and this conversation is where their divorce was fully finalized, right? And I think the moment that sealed the deal, the signature, is when Tom said, you know what, you might not be a good person to have kids. You left me with this cheap wine. You won't bear my children. Maybe there's a reason. And she just had it. Their marriage is one that's so loveless, and it's all about power dynamics, right? Like, Shiv doesn't really love Tom, and Tom loves the idea of Shiv. They're not a real couple. Right, and I don't think Shiv was wrong in saying that Tom just wants her for her DNA. Right, there is a prestige there. She's kind of another luxury item. Like, I think some part of it is that with Tom. So they were never really that compatible. And by the end of it, they were kind of done pretending to be. The episode, as soon as they go their separate ways, you can see the way Tom is just raging. And I think Tom is a Trojan horse, He's a virus waiting to be unleashed. And this is the episode where something just snaps in him. Like, you can tell he's done. He's done looking for a person to serve. He's taking himself out of prison. And Tom is the person that, problems always come from places, things you don't see coming. Right? And I want to talk about briefly Ken and Roman. This episode was really interesting because just talking about Roman by himself, he wasn't as explosive as he was in the last episode. And I also find it very strange that Ken doesn't call Roman out on anything, right? Whether it be the firings, whether it be the decision to allow Roman to speak for their, for the family on behalf of their father, during this tribute that's coming, during basically like everything, right? So Ken is just in the background. And I was thinking, like, Ken made a comment at the end of the episode and he was like, one head, one crown, something like that. And I don't think this co-CEO thing works. And sometimes it feels like Ken is watching Roman like kind of dig his own grave so he can kind of oust him. Because right now Roman has done a lot of things that, to be honest, might be grounds for dismissal. Right, and it looks like Ken is low-key letting the bodies pile up. You guys let me know, but watching Ken just kind of be like, that's enough. I was like, your heart's not really in it. So that was the Lukas side. In terms of the political side, this was a disaster. And Connor and Willow actually felt like a real couple this episode. So Roman was tasked with the duty of basically asking Connor to drop out. So this election is a lot closer than it seems. And apparently it's tearing everybody apart. Right, they've kind of used ATN to actively promote a candidate, and people are disgusted by it. And again, these children are not very good at doing what Logan did, right? Like, I don't think Logan had any political allegiance. I think he just kind of hedged his bets and called in favors when he needed to. But the way in which ATN has been actively promoting this candidate, it looks bad. They have no credibility. The episode starts and they're firing a bunch of people. Apparently, what did Greg say? 300 heads? 200 heads? I don't even know how many heads he said. Like, it was a lot of heads. So they're kind of firing people to make themselves seem more legitimate, but it just makes them look more shady. And during this party, we get glimpses into kind of news reports. Apparently ATN is actively trying to make it seem like, the Democrats are lying, like their candidate still has a chance, like all this fake news. We'll get news of an incident regarding involving firecrackers, someone attacking something. Like, there's some news in the background that just unsettles everybody, and it seems like the majority of the room doesn't really like the candidate that, ATN is supporting. And so watching them trying to convince Connor was really funny because he has spent so much money, and the series has made that clear. This guy has spent over $100 million. He's at 5 or 6%. And apparently the numbers that he has is enough to potentially swing, the election in favor of one of these other two candidates that are more likely to win. Right? So his few percent is looking pretty pivotal. And I was proud of Connor for not taking the deal, and Willa for standing by him. Like, they sacrificed that wedding. Like, they basically put everything. Like, the dude spent so much money chasing a fantasy, right? He wasn't about to give up at the last moment. And the way Roman goes at him, right? Like, again, I was expecting Roman to snap, but I didn't know at who. And he basically fired Connor from being his brother. Like, he was ready to fire Connor, but he didn't really have anything to fire him for. He was like, you need to pack your bags, you need to go to Oman, you and your wife. Like, that was so disrespectful. And Connor was like, you're desperate, I'm leaving. You know, peace in the Middle East, I'm not going to Oman. You know, like, he was out. Roman just, I don't know. You know, he's not very good at convincing people of anything. It seems like he doesn't have that skill, right? If you can't even convince your own brother to do you a favor, how does that bode well for you as a CEO? And, you know, discussing his partner, Ken next to Roman looks really competent, but he's kind of also morphing into something really ugly, right? I think one of the most interesting parts of this episode is when he meets his ex, and they're discussing their daughter and how she's being bullied because of ATN. And, you know, basically they called it a racist network. And the way Ken explains himself, he's like, you know, I'm doing this for their future. I'm doing it for him, you know, for them. And honestly, I have never seen Ken be a father in these 4 years, so I don't know what he does, but it ain't much. And he's kind of taking on this attitude. You know, he's about to mess his kids up as badly as his father messed him up. And so he's taking on this greater than me attitude. And so by the end of the episode, when he realizes that they could buy Lucas's company, I think he made the decision that he needs to become CEO any means necessary, right? He pulls Frank aside and he's like, listen, you with me or are you out? And that's how the episode ends. So you guys let me know what you think, and until next time.